Is everything okay here? He seems a bit uncomfortable.
Yes, thank you. He's just a bit tired, I think.
She noticed what the doctors overlooked and saved the billionaire's son's life in seconds. The afternoon sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Meridian Restaurant, casting geometric shadows across the polished marble floors. It was the kind of establishment where reservations were made months in advance, where silence was golden and discretion was paramount. The clientele included CEOs, politicians, and old money families who valued privacy. Above all else, Emma Torres had been working as a server at Meridian for 8 months. At 32 years old, she'd spent the last decade working her way through various restaurants in Manhattan, but this job was different. The pay was exceptional, the environment was professional, and for the first time in years, she felt like she might actually be building towards something stable. But Emma's path to Meridian had been anything but straightforward. Before becoming a server, she'd spent 6 years in nursing school and 2 years working in a pediatric emergency room. She'd loved the work, loved helping children, loved the adrenaline and purpose that came with saving lives. Then her father had suffered a massive stroke, leaving him partially paralyzed and unable to work. With her mother already gone and her siblings scattered across the country, Emma became his primary caregiver. The demanding hospital shifts became impossible to maintain alongside her father's care needs. She'd made the painful decision to leave nursing, taking a job that offered flexibility and decent money. Restaurant work allowed her to care for her father during the day and work evening shifts. She told herself it was temporary, that once her father stabilized, she returned to medicine. But months had turned into years, and the dream of going back had faded into a quiet ache she tried not to think about. A day was a Tuesday, typically one of the quieter days at Meridian, but the restaurant was still half full with the usual lunch crowd. Emma had been assigned to the private dining section, a separate room with panoramic windows overlooking Central Park. It was reserved for VIP guests who valued privacy for their business meetings or family gatherings. Her table today was occupied by 2 people: a distinguished man in his mid-40s wearing an immaculate navy suit, and a boy who appeared to be around 8 years old, dressed in a button-down shirt and khakis. The man had the bearing of someone accustomed to authority, with sharp features and dark hair graying at the temples. The boy shared his features but seemed quieter, more withdrawn. Emma had served them appetizers and entrees, noticing that while the man ate with purpose, the boy merely pushed his food around his plate, taking only a few small bites. She'd seen this before: children dragged to fancy restaurants, bored and wishing they were anywhere else. "How is everything?" Emma asked, approaching the table with her practiced professional smile. "Excellent, thank you," the man replied without looking up from the document he was reviewing. His tone was polite but distant, the voice of someone whose mind was occupied with more important matters. Emma glanced at the boy, who met her eyes briefly before looking back down at his plate. There was something in his expression, not just boredom, but discomfort. His face looked slightly flushed, and she noticed him tugging at his collar. "Is everything all right with your meal?" Emma asked the boy gently. "It's fine," he said quietly, but his voice sounded strained. The man looked up then, finally giving his son his attention. "Daniel, eat your lunch. We don't have much time." "I'm not really hungry, Dad," Daniel said, and Emma noticed he was breathing a bit more rapidly than normal. "You barely touched your breakfast either," the father said with a hint of frustration. "You need to eat something." Emma hesitated, then asked, "Are you feeling okay, sweetheart?" Daniel nodded, but she saw him swallow hard, and his hand went to his throat, briefly. It was a small gesture, almost nothing, but Emma's medical training kicked in immediately. Something wasn't right. "I'll just clear these plates," Emma said, reaching for Daniel's barely touched food. As she leaned closer, she noticed something that made her blood run cold. Daniel's lips had a faint bluish tint, and there were small red spots appearing on his neck. Emma's mind raced through differential diagnoses at lightning speed. Flushed face, rapid breathing, difficulty swallowing, cyanosis around the lips, petechiae developing on the skin. These weren't symptoms of a child being picky about food. "Daniel," Emma said, setting down the plates and kneeling beside his chair, so she was at eye level, "can you tell me if your throat feels tight? Or if it's hard to breathe?" The boy's eyes widened slightly and he nodded, a flash of fear crossing his face. The father's attention snapped fully to his son now. What? Daniel, what's wrong? Emma's training took over completely. Sir, I think your son is having an allergic reaction. Has he eaten anything new today? Allergic reaction? That's impossible. Daniel doesn't have any food allergies. He's been tested multiple times. But Emma was already assessing Daniel more closely. His breathing was definitely labored now, and she could hear a faint wheeze. The flush on his face was deepening and more red spots were appearing on his skin. These were the classic signs of anaphylaxis, and they were progressing rapidly. Daniel, have you ever felt like this before? Emma asked calmly, keeping her voice steady even as her heart raced. The boy shook his head, his eyes showing more fear now. He tried to speak, but seemed to struggle, and Emma saw him clutch at his throat. His airway is compromising, Emma said, her voice sharp with urgency. We need to call 911 right now. Sir, does your son have an EpiPen? No, I told you he doesn't have allergies. The father started, but Emma was already pulling out her phone. I'm calling for an ambulance, she said, dialing quickly. But she knew that in anaphylaxis, minutes mattered. Seconds mattered. If Daniel's airway closed completely before help arrived, he could die. As the 911 operator answered, Emma spoke quickly and clearly. I need an ambulance at Meridian Restaurant, 445 Park Avenue, private dining room. 8-year-old boy suspected anaphylaxis, presenting with respiratory distress, cyanosis, and urticaria. Airway compromising rapidly. The father had stood up, his face pale, his previous composure shattered. Daniel, look at me. You're going to be fine. But Daniel was struggling more now. His breathing was becoming more difficult, his lips darkening to a deeper blue. Emma knew they didn't have time to wait for the ambulance. Does this restaurant have an emergency medical kit? Emma asked a colleague who had rushed over, drawn by the commotion. Yes, in the manager's office, get it now. And ask if anyone has an EpiPen, check the staff, check the other diners, anyone. Emma turned back to Daniel, who was now clearly in severe distress. His hands were at his throat, his eyes wide with panic, as he fought to breathe. Daniel, listen to me, Emma said, keeping her voice calm and authoritative. I'm a nurse. I'm going to help you. Try to stay calm and breathe slowly through your nose if you can. She turned to the father. Sir, I need you to tell me everything he's eaten today. Everything. The man's voice shook as he answered. Just toast for breakfast. And here he had the chicken. And wait, he had strawberries. Fresh strawberries with his toast this morning. He's never had a problem with strawberries before. Allergies can develop at any time, Emma said. It's possible this is his first reaction. Daniel's breathing was becoming increasingly strained. Emma could hear the wheeze growing louder, a sound that meant his airways were swelling shut. She knew they had maybe minutes before his airway closed completely. The colleague returned with a small medical kit, and Emma tore through it, hoping against hope to find epinephrine. But it was a basic first aid kit: bandages, antiseptic, nothing that could help with anaphylaxis. Emma's mind raced. Without an EpiPen, without epinephrine, what could she do? Then she remembered something from her ER training, a last resort intervention for airway emergencies. Get me a pen, she said. A ballpoint pen, the kind that comes apart. What? The colleague looked confused. Now, Emma commanded. As the colleague rushed to find a pen, Emma positioned Daniel carefully. His lips were nearly purple now, his breathing reduced to desperate wheezing gasps. He was losing consciousness. The father grabbed Emma's arm. What are you doing? What's happening? Your son's airway is closing, Emma said bluntly. If we don't act now, he'll stop breathing entirely. I was an ER nurse. I know what I'm doing, but I need you to trust me. The pen arrived, a simple ballpoint pen. Emma quickly disassembled it, removing the ink cartridge and both ends, leaving just the hollow plastic tube. She grabbed a knife from the table setting and held it briefly over the flame of a table candle to sterilize it. What are you going to do? The father asked, his voice rising in panic. A cricothyrotomy, Emma said. An emergency airway. It's dangerous, but he's dying right now. We don't have a choice. The father looked at his unconscious son, then at Emma, and made a decision. Do it. Emma's hands were steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her. She'd practiced this procedure dozens of times in training but had only performed it once in real life. She felt for Daniel's cricothyroid membrane, the soft spot between the thyroid and cricoid cartilages in his neck. With one quick, decisive movement, she made a small horizontal incision. Blood welled up, and the father made a choking sound, but Emma didn't hesitate. She inserted the hollow pen tube through the incision directly into Daniel's trachea, creating an emergency airway that bypassed his swollen throat. For a horrible moment, nothing happened. Then Daniel gasped, air rushing through the improvised tube. His chest rose and fell. He was breathing. The father was crying, his hands shaking as he held his son's hand. Is he? He's breathing, Emma said. But we need that ambulance now. As if on cue, sirens wailed outside. Within moments, paramedics rushed in with proper equipment: oxygen, epinephrine, advanced airway management tools. Emma quickly briefed them on what had happened and what she'd done. You performed a critch with a pen, one paramedic said, impressed and slightly horrified. I had no choice, Emma said simply. As they loaded Daniel onto a stretcher, the father turned to Emma. You saved my son's life. The doctors, they all said he didn't have any allergies. They missed it. But you saw what they overlooked. Emma felt tears prick her eyes. This was why she'd become a nurse. This moment, at the hospital, Daniel made a full recovery. The tests confirmed he had indeed developed a new, severe allergy to strawberries, something that had never shown up in previous allergy testing because it hadn't existed before. Allergies can emerge at any age, especially in children. 2 days later, the father who Emma learned was Marcus Ashford, CEO of Ashford Industries, and, yes, a billionaire, came to find her at the restaurant. I owe you more than I can ever repay, he said. You saved Daniel's life. If you hadn't been there, if you hadn't noticed what everyone else missed, I would have lost my son. I'm just glad I was there, Emma said. I did some research, Marcus continued. I know you're a trained nurse. I know you left to care for your father. I want to help. I'm establishing a foundation in Daniel's name, focused on allergy awareness and emergency medical training. And I'd like you to run it. Full salary, benefits, and we'll also arrange full-time care for your father with the best staff available. Emma stared at him, unable to speak. You gave me back my son, Marcus said simply. Please, let me give you back your calling. 6 months later, Emma stood in the modern offices of the Daniel Ashford Foundation, watching as another group of restaurant workers completed their training in recognizing and responding to allergic reactions. The foundation had already saved 3 lives by getting EpiPens into restaurants and training staff to recognize the signs she'd seen in Daniel, and every evening, Emma visited her father in his new assisted living facility, where he was thriving with round-the-clock care and physical therapy that was finally helping him recover more mobility. She kept a photo on her desk, Daniel, healthy and smiling, holding a certificate from his new school proclaiming him their allergy awareness ambassador. He wore a medical alert bracelet now, and carried 2 EpiPens everywhere. Beneath the photo, Emma had written a quote that had become her personal motto: sometimes the most important thing we can do is pay attention when everyone else has looked away. The day Emma noticed what the doctors had overlooked wasn't just the day she saved a child's life. It was the day she saved her own, finding her way back to the purpose that had called her to medicine in the first place. But because sometimes being in the right place at the right time isn't luck. Sometimes it's destiny.